Ms. Noora, and Salam Alaikum, Namaste, greetings, and Ramadan Kareem to each of you. We at Spinneys are quite glad to be associated with this holistic event for the very first time. And I would like to start by first thanking the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries, Wealth, and Water Resources, as well as the organizers for making this event happen. Last year, the pandemic COVID-19 2020 was a very memorable year, and it has made a lot of us refocus our business priorities and brought food safety, food security, and sustainability to the forefront of all priorities. I was very glad to also see that all these critical elements have been very well imbibed across the 5 themes for this year's conference. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Sharon Sausman, and I head the technical and compliance team for the group. I am supported by a very motivated, driven, competent, and flexible team of professionals. And we've got Maimuna, who is our Oman counterpart, who works and looks after the functions out there in Oman across the stores. All right. So I'm Sharon Sausman, head of the technical compliance for Spinneys, and supported by a very motivated and driven team. We've got Maimuna in Oman, who looks after the functions out there across our stores in Oman. A bit of group perspective. We are a supermarket chain, and we are super focused on freshness and quality. We're here for 60 years. We've got 72 stores across UAE and Oman, and they're across the Spinneys, the Waitrose, and the Al Fair brands. We've got 6 factories over 2 massive locations in the UAE. We also construct community malls. We've got 3 international sourcing offices and 4 international support offices, a 40,000 square feet warehouse that manages around 16,000 articles delivery and distribution across all the sites. Now, before we delve into any further information, I'd just like to share with you our pre-pandemic baseline, as I call it, just to share with you what were we doing before March 2020 with regard to food safety and systems across the brands. So we have our own internal quality assurance system, which was implemented and monitored and being inspected at a set frequency across all sites. Over and above the internal system, we have an active role of a HACCP, which is the food safety management system, across our stores for the past 7 or 8 years, at the pace of approximately or average 5 stores per year. So every year, another 5 stores gets pulled into the third-party certification system, which is quite intensive. It's a lot of collaboration between the different departments, but at the rate of 5, we've managed to maintain that pace even throughout last year before the pandemic. Sure, I'll do that right away. If you just give me a minute, I'll just plug it in. Hello. Hello. Perfect. All right. So yes, so I just explained the pre-pandemic baseline, the internal QA systems, the active rollout of the HACCP food safety management system. And as you will understand, to be able to manage these parallel systems, we have to have a very sound foundation of procedures, SOPs, templates, and manuals. And having all this in place, what it actually requires, what we have come to evolve over the past many years, is a very robust document control and change communication system. And the reason I put a red star, this is one of the saving graces, one of the blessings that helped us last year to go through the pandemic, because we already had a change communication system that everybody was familiar with. So yes, today most of the presentation will be based on information from the UAE, but I would like to emphasize that we have a very similar and parallel approach all across our stores in Oman as well. So we're very happy with the pre-pandemic baseline. Then came March 2020, and then came COVID along with it. It was abrupt, as all of you will remember, rapid, sudden, and very scary. There was no time to think and react. It was just get on with it. It is unforgettable experience for most of us. But if I might say, on behalf of me and my team, one of the most fulfilling experiences of our careers. What I will share with you today is some of the new challenges we faced last year and some of the new initiatives we implemented last year. So with regard to the new challenges, I've kind of categorized it into 5 different segments: new encounters, new supplies, new restrictions, new activities, new context. I'll move on to the first one, which is new encounters. So first of all, in March, April last year, just to take your memories back, anybody who was deemed to be a close contact or a patient of COVID positive, as you would call it, symptomatic or asymptomatic, was taken out of work for 14 days. They needed 2 negatives to come back to work. There was a spike, there was a huge increase in the number of cases, which led to increased PCR testing requirements, so delays in getting appointments and delays in getting the reports. And all this led to a massive staff shortage. So the new staff that we bought, or the temporary staff we got to offset the shortage, now needed another big push for induction training and before on-job training for food safety and health and safety. We were faced with new kinds of situations, something first of its kind, of course. Customers were very, very highly vigilant. They were complaining about each other. Somebody touched an apple, somebody coughed, somebody didn't hand sanitize their hands, somebody's eyes were red. It was good because they were policing each other, but it was a brilliant effort from the store team to be able to manage the various situations, maintain the peace and the much needed calm. Another thing we had, another new situation was additional inspections. Now, in the past, we were very familiar with routine inspection from the public health and safety and from the food safety teams. But now we had additional inspections from civil defense, from CIDs, from DEDs, economic departments, from mall management, from community developments, zonal development. So there was a lot of, and all I'm sure had their own positive thing to kind of make sure everything was in control. But for us, it was to be able to attend to all of that was a bit of a challenge. Then with regard to retail stock. Now, when I talk about retail stock, what I'm talking about is the stock that we sell on the shop floor as a retail product. So there were very few brands that were out of stock. But having said that, I must emphasize that no commodity items was implicated with the out of stock situation. Throughout last year, the commodities have been available throughout. And the only reason that has happened is because of a massive continual collaborative effort from the planning team, from the commercial team, and from the overseas sourcing team. And they had a very stressful time, but they ensured that the commodities item was not compromised. The second star, we said private, call it as private tie-ups. Now, when there was the pandemic, the number of cases increased. Most of our staff live in sharing accommodations. So if somebody is positive, you need to take the staff out. If somebody is a patient, you need to transfer them to the isolation centers or hospitals. And depending on the availability, it would take time. Sometimes it would take 2 to 3 days, sometime a week to take the patients away. So to combat all of that, we then began to provide staff accommodation in hotels and in flats, which we took on rent. And we also had tie-up with hospitals. And this was one of the biggest blessing number 2, actually, if I will call it, because then we could speed up the PCR test for asymptomatic patients, and then they had the 2 negatives and they could come back to work faster. Hospital tie-ups, it also was done for the vaccination recently, and that we're quite thankful for. The next category is new supplies. And what I mean by this is that supplies which is for shop use, not for selling to the customer, but this is what we're actually using in store for cleaning and sanitizing and for our in-house quality assurance practices. So first there was, of course, a concern or availability of chemicals, because of course a sudden surge in demand would lead to a constraint in supply. How did we overcome that? By reduced pack size. One interesting thing we learned is that the same formulation is sold in 4 different brands. So if one brand is not available, you just list another brand and move on with it. So the retail cleaning program, the disinfection program is not compromised because it's the same formulation, just a different brand. It was very easy to change the name of the chemical, the procedure was there, and communicate the change. And of course, there was additional dispensers because there was a requirement, there is a requirement to put the additional hand sanitizer dispenser well outside the food safety departments. So across the checkouts, across the supermarkets, across the corridors, there was now extended use of disinfectants and all these new dispensers. So there would have been a temporary hitch, but because we've got the warehouse with the huge backstock, it was all helpful. Some new equipments that we had to source, and each of them was a learning in itself. One being the clinical thermometer, which was the infrared fever thermometer. So the requirement was to check the temperature of every incoming customer, staff, visitor. And it was very interesting to note that there's a difference in a clinical thermometer and an infrared food thermometer. Then the N95 mask, then you learn about the different types of masks, what are the functions, which is the suitable one, different types of gloves, PPE, foggers. Now, of course, foggers are basically machines used for disinfection, which generates a very fine mist and disinfects the space in the air. Constraints of hairnets and PPE would have led to us using colorful hairnets at different times, but as long as the primary function of food safety was being done, the color did not matter because at least there was not much of a choice with availability. And the third saving grace, or the third blessing, is something we call health kit. So what exactly is a health kit? What we did in Spinneys, the compliance team actually has a brilliant idea that whenever anybody was sick in a sharing accommodation, they're going to have a lot of struggles. So it would be wise to actually give them some form of kit with some form of basic necessities that would help them get over that period of isolation or quarantine, as the case may be. So we began to put together health kits. So what exactly was a health kit and what does it compose of? So it was like a plastic shower curtain, and as simple as it may seem, when you're living in sharing accommodation, it becomes difficult to isolate yourself. So this was a good idea. And basic things, as you can see, Vicks, Clorox, Vaporub. And this was actually assembled by a team of really motivated people who went out of their way to go, because remember, at that time, everything was in short supply. So they would go out of the way, get it together, assemble it, put it together, and then arrange for its delivery to the person's house. Even if the person is a patient or a close contact, it was delivered to their house with all the PPE intact. If the hospital would not allow it, then that was the case. We would not deliver it. But other than that, everybody who was either positive or PCC would have got a health kit. What were some of the new restrictions we faced last year? As we all know, of course, there were building lockdown, there were area lockdown, and this was additional staff not being able to go to work, not because of being sick or because of being PCC, but just because of the lockdowns. Then people who were 12 to 60 were not allowed to enter supermarkets. They had to, they were restricted from entering the supermarkets. Public spaces were shut down. One of the things we did when the 60-year-olds were not allowed to enter the supermarkets, we actually asked if they wanted us, because there would be a lot of people who live alone. They're 60 years old, but they can't shop. So now what do? So they would come to the checkout. If they had needed us any help to get shopping, we would go collect the shopping list and help them with their shopping. The next thing was travel and capacity, of course, reduced capacity. So now there was a restriction on the number of customers that could be in a supermarket at a time, 50% less. There was a restriction on the number of staff that could be in the travel bus, 50% less. There was a restriction on the number of parking spaces that you could offer to the customers to park in the malls or the community centers that we own, which was 70% less. If the store was a little bit smaller, then you need to have 4 square meters per customer. So all these things had to be addressed and actioned on immediately. The third one was customers and displays. So here there was a requirement of having isolation areas for any customer who's coming in. Every place you need to have a place, a sit for the customer to sit if they have fever when they enter. So there was like an isolation area made in all the community centers. There was, of course, checkpoints for masks and sanitizers and gloves, checking for the customer when they come in. Interestingly, I've got a photo down there, as you can see, for the packaged produce. So there was a requirement in one of the Emirates that 50% of the produce had to be packaged, which was done. Salad bars had to be closed, and a lot of signage and a lot of communication internally as well as externally being done continuously in line with all the various requirements. Some new activities that we did on an urgent basis. This was one of, I think this is the star number 4, health related. So we have a document that we call it is called PEHQ. It's acronymed as PEHQ. It's a pre-employment health questionnaire, and it's basically a setup of 40 questions. An outcome of those questions is an assessment, and it gives you a risk rating of the health condition of the staff. So what this does, once you finish answering that questions, you're either deemed to be fit, fair, serious, or critical. And this is already there. It was there in a different kind of a online system, but not necessarily a portal, a different system. But how this helped us, if somebody was positive, or if somebody was deemed to be a primary close contact, the first thing we would look at is, are they serious, critical, or fair? Then if anything of that was, it would trigger a check, and you look into their history and you find out if they are serious, critical, maybe they've got some other underlying conditions. In that case, the team would then 100% get mobilized to start pushing for the ambulance, to start calling people and make sure they go to the hospital to get all the required care they would need. Case calls. This is something which was done across all the patients, across all the primary close contact, each and every day. Each and every person got a call from the compliance team. And this is basically to ensure there's no symptom development in the cases when they are in isolation or when they are in quarantine. And all this data is maintained on a track sheet. The next new activity we did was basically fogging and disinfection over the last, and this would actually include stores, sites, delivery vehicles, vans, cars, homes, and accommodations as and when required. These include preventive and corrective disinfections, and approximately 2,500 was done until a month and a half ago. And then, of course, support and care teams, full teams were actually put in place and mobilized. One was for the health kit team, one was a delivery and transport team, one was a fogging team, one was a customer social distancing team. So there was a team, there were actually people whose job was actually to go around the stores and ensure customers are keeping 2 meters distance. There was a team who actually got together to get all the health kits. So these are all teams mobilized at very short notice, and all of them have played their part brilliantly, which is why we are able to actually have the get over last year throughout the pandemic. One of the pictures out here, like I've shown out there, is vitamin C water in the dispenser, an excellent initiative from the warehouse, where during the pandemic, there was a lot of things about vitamin C being able to help you with your health. So there was vitamins being brought and put into the dispenser. So it encouraged the staff to drink a lot more water. And also it was positive to see the consumption of water also increased. There was a lot of consolidated advisories because, as you would understand, there's different emirates having different requirements. There was local requirements, there are federal requirements, there were different departments issuing requirements. So we had to pull together all of that requirements, consolidate it, filter it as applicable to us, chat and review or screen with the concerned authorities wherever required, and then put it in an advisory. All that then further went into signages. So some of the new contexts. A lot of collaboration, and this is star number 5. A lot of collaboration. We started to actually work with different teams, government authority teams that we now worked in the past, like the Dubai Health Authority, the SEHA, the DED. So it was good. So at least we had a phone, a number, a name to call person, and to at least get clarification whenever there was required. There was email correspondence in addition to be able to understand the requirement, because sometimes it's an interpretation that could also lead to a massive impact. Food security, like I explained earlier, none of the commodity items was affected. So that was one big plus point. And the last was something we call virtual activity. Everybody was at home. Nobody could go outside. So what the marketing team did a lot of virtual space related digital activities like runs in your own house. So we got some pictures of people running in their garden, they're running at home. There was cooking activities, there was competitions, all held virtually by people in their own homes, and that was a big success, and it was very positively accepted. So now we've gone through all the 5 different aspects of the new challenges we faced last year. And in the midst of all of that, the new normal, we have kind of emerged for all of us. Terminologies, work from home, MS Teams, and a Zoom meeting and a Zoom conference is also happening successfully. Digital virtual space is being exploited or explored a lot more than we would have thought a couple of years ago. Terms like isolation, quarantine, disinfectant, sanitizers have become common knowledge. PPE, social distancing, 2 meters, masks, shields, hazmat suits, QR, a lot of things have become common in a very short time. Just to prove the saying, where there is a will, there is a way, and when there is a need, we will find a way. Now, some of the key initiatives that we took last year, over and above the ones I've shared, which were being done on an urgent basis. So, as we know, there was a huge demand for e-commerce or e-shopping. So the team out here in the midst of the pandemic got mobilized, and the e-commerce, so the Spinneys online shopping and the Waitrose online shopping websites were launched. Self-checkouts, these are the checkouts in the big stores that you will see across our supermarkets. These are all to minimize contact with the cashier, so you can go and get your goods out on your own self. And this is the health portal, the one that I explained earlier about the risk rating and the PHQ assessment. So this is all on the portal. The data is all there, so it becomes very easy to manage, filter, and extract the data. Now, local incubator program is a flagship program, actually, a very new initiative that started last year when we realized that a lot of local suppliers are there, small-time suppliers who need access. This was actually an idea from our CEO, to be able to give them a platform to be able to put their products into the supermarket. So there was like a dragon den or like a competition held for them, where they all came and they kind of explained the products and the concepts and what the product can do. And after all the entries, it was screened and screened and screened, and then there were around 20 of them selected, and their products get launched in our supermarkets. But besides getting launched, what they also have is a lot of support. A lot of fees are waived off for them. They have support from the compliance team, from the DM, from the commercial team, from all the different buyers, the finance team, and also the leadership team to help them develop their brand. So these are some of the winners of the incubator program this year. It's soon to be launched in Oman, most probably again this year. These were for last year, and they're in phases. So you'll have the last phase happening sometime in the next quarter. Yeah, it was very interesting to just get to know some fantastic brands, fantastic products. So yes, with that, I come to the end of my presentation. I do thank you for all your attention. I look forward to working and collaborating with the Oman Food Safety and the Concerns team. I would like to share the contact details for Maimuna, who is a counterpart in Oman,